Good afternoon, morning, or evening to everyone on the webinar today. Thank you for joining us and welcome to the Senturus webinar series. Today's topic is automate a Cognos content inventory to speed up cleanups and migrations. Today's agenda, we'll cover some introductions, why are we here today, discuss some challenges, review how to create a inventory of your Cognos content. We'll do a live demo. We'll wrap up with a quick Senturus overview and discuss some additional resources, and then we'll open it up to a live Q&A session. Joining me today is my colleague, Senior Consultant Peter Gigopoulos. Peter is a seasoned data architect who is very passionate about utilizing technology to design and implement solutions for clients. I'm your host today, Todd Schumann. I run the install, upgrade, and optimization practice at Senturus. You may recognize me from box office smash hits such as Dr. Cognos and the Metadata of Madness and the Tableau Chainsaw Massacre. Jokes aside, let's get into it. We have a few polls to get a pulse on the audience today. Poll number one, what are your goals for Cognos? You need to change data sources, move to the cloud, migrate to a new platform, you're trying to clean up your Cognos environment, or something else not listed here.
Okay, you have got about 85% with wanting to clean up the Cognos environment, followed that by a tie between changing data sources and migrating to a new BI platform with 35%, moving to the cloud 25%, and other, which would be interesting if you want to put that in the chat on what other is.
Great, thank you. Okay, got one more poll. How many Cognos reports does your organization have? 0 to 500, 500 to 1,000, 1,000 to 10,000, over 10,000, or maybe you don't know part of the reason why you're here today. Okay, looks like majority of you, about 38%, have somewhere between 500 and 1,000. Right behind that is someone 1,000 to 10,000, and then a little bit below that we got 0 to 500. So good amount of content out there in your Cognos environments. So thank you for the feedback. Let's go get into today's topic. The main question is, why are we here? Migrations. Based on some of the feedback, most of you are involved in preparing for at least one of these types. One of the most common ones is data source changes. You know, are you switching from one vendor to another? SQL to Oracle, Oracle to Snowflake. The amount of databases available today is really something else based on what it looked like a couple years ago. Maybe you're moving from on-prem SQL Server to a cloud-based instance. So lots of different challenges and in migrations from the database aspect of it. We've also got platform migrations. Maybe you're moving from Cognos to Tableau or Power BI, Looker, something else. Or maybe you're moving from one of those platforms to Cognos. Lots of tools available today as well, each with their own strengths and weaknesses. Whatever you're moving to, you're going to need to recreate models, reports, and make sure you capture that business logic that's embedded in those old reports. And then finally, it looks like a good amount of you today aren't so much doing a migration, but more of an internal assessment cleanup. If you've been using Cognos for a long time, I know we've got customers who are 10 plus, 15, 20 years of Cognos usage. After time, it's difficult to kind of get a grasp on what that is. How many reports do I have? Are people using the reports? The multiple versions of duplicates floating around. How can I get this information out of Cognos and try to reduce my cost of ownership? So what are the challenges? No surprise here, migrations are inherently challenging. The grass is always greener. A new tool can offer the promise of better performance and new functionality that will hopefully enable analytics and drive better business outcomes. So what is preventing us from just making those migrations? When properly done, a good BI environment is going to shield the end user from complexity and inaccuracies of addressing the data directly from the database. Things like a well-defined business logic and terminology that's presented to the metadata, that's easy to use, well-organized, breaks out different subject areas. You have a high level of trust in that data. So more often than not, end users are not really seeing the whole picture, more of just the tip of the iceberg. as shown here, and what's actually going on behind the scenes is much more difficult and complex. We've got cryptic data source systems, data warehouses and tables, multiple transformations and business logic that's being built out, data models, complex reports and dashboards as well on top of all that. So there's a lot of hidden complexity that you may or may not be aware of that's sort of driving the presentation layer of your BI reporting and dashboarding. So while it's complex in your own mind, you can see here various elements of a Cognos environment and how they add up. So this is a pretty common view you might encounter when kind of mapping your data sources to your FM models, to your reports. Here we've got multiple data sources in the different databases. We've got those that tie to different layers in your FM models, the physical layer, business layer. We've got packages coming out of that. We've got reports which have their own objects as well. We've got queries, objects that are driven from the queries, and lots of different pages. So it's a lot of moving pieces, as you can see. And when you start kind of putting all that together, looking at the individual reports through the business logic, it gets really messy very quickly, as you can see through some of these animations. Trying to tie, where's that database table mapped to, which goes to this field, it gets pretty ugly pretty quickly. So the real question is, how can we unravel this Cognos content? To scope and complete migrations, you need to basically figure out what models do I have, what are the reports I have, tie that together with usage. As you can imagine, it's extremely time consuming to go through this report by report manually. If you go through, you have to kind of go in and break down how many pages do I have, what's on each page, what queries are driving those objects, what are the calculations and fields, where do those map to, what filters do I have? There's just a lot of information in a single report. And again, based on the polls we saw, most of you have at least around 500, some of you going over 1,000, some of you going close to 10,000. To manually go and try to map all that information out is going to be extremely difficult and time consuming. To make matters even worse, the My Content, if you've got users who are storing stuff in their My Folders, My Content area, it's very difficult to access those. You have to either navigate through the namespaces, Active Directory, LDAPs, and go into individual users' folders and copy them out somewhere and edit them. It's just a real pain and difficult to work with. And then on top of that, the Cognos audit data, hopefully you have that turned on. It does help things a lot, but even that is incomplete picture of the data. It's sort of an on-demand database. So if I've got 100 reports and only 20 of them have ever been run, those other 80 reports aren't going to show up in that audit data because it hasn't ever been touched, or an entry hasn't ever been entered into that audit database. So I'm not going to know which reports haven't been run on the fact that they're just missing from my audit database. So again, there's a lot of extra work and extra process and time invested in trying to unravel that Cognos content, which again leads to these questions. What do I need to clean up? How many reports do I have in total? Both within the team content and the My content. Do I need all of them? Are any of these duplicates or very similar? Is the sales report and the sales report that has underscore someone's name on it and a date, is that the same report or is it different? How can I clean these up? Does each report contain different elements, different queries, calculations, joins, prompts, lots of different things that each report can contain? And also, what are the sources for databases? Do you know exactly what reports are referencing what tables? If you've got multiple databases, how can you figure out easily which ones are mapping to which databases, which vendors, tables, views? So it's just an overwhelming process and very difficult to kind of wrap your head around if you're just getting started. So let's talk about the process. Using a proven methodology, we can help greatly reduce the risk, cost, time, and effort. So let's take a look at that process. So we kind of have four major steps here. We've got the assessment stage, which we always recommend starts with an inventory. You need to index all your reports, packages, jobs, schedules, etc. We need to capture the lineage of all the objects, tie it back to the database tables and the fields. We need to also capture the usage and the reports with none. Once you've got that, you can kind of begin to build out your roadmap. Do we want to target specific business units. If we're doing a database migration and we're moving from Oracle to Teradata, let's identify all the reports that are hitting these Oracle databases. Can you figure out which ones are those? Do we want to focus on usage? These are the top 10 most run reports. We're going to move these 10 first. Or is there users? Let's address the sales team or the executive team and target those users. What reports are they running? Let's build those and move those over. So obviously different ways to kind of target and filter down that inventory once you've built it. Once you've got that list, again, you want to go ahead and optimize. Can we get rid of some of these reports? What can we delete? What can be left behind? Do I have a lot of duplicates? How similar are these other reports that have different naming conventions but look like they're exact same report? And just leverage a lot of common models, subject areas. If I want to move over a bunch of reports, do I have to create 20 different models, or are they all kind of leveraging the same sort of tables, and I can just build one master model to leverage that and address all those reports? And then finally put it all together, execute the plan. Build out your targets, apply the optimizations, leverage that inventory to get the specs and the model tables, relationships, all the logic and the models, and then finally create those old reports in the new tool. So it's a lot of work. It's a long process. And as I mentioned, we want to start with an inventory. The better upfront effort to assess and do this, the more success we're going to have. So obviously we want to create an inventory. So how do we do that? We got two options. The manual option, which I've done in the past, it's again very time consuming. As I mentioned, those of you who have less than 500 reports, it might be manageable. It's going to be time consuming as well. But if you're looking at in the thousands to 10,000s, it's going to be extremely difficult to touch every single Cognos report and basically map that information back to the packages, into the models and the database tables. So looking at going into each report and package, and then also trying to leverage that audit data and sync it up. You've got report names and how often it was run, how many times it was run, and basically put all together in some sort of Excel workbook, or maybe build it on your own database, something like that. The other option is to automate that, and that's what we're going to talk about next. We've got a tool that we want to show you called the Migration Assistant. You can run this tool. It's going to go ahead and capture all that information from your Cognos Content Store database, and it'll allow you to basically run some predefined reports that allow you to have visibility into all aspects of your content. So what it does is it's going to programmatically decode and inventory all of your Cognos reports and packages and build that into a new database. You're going to have a new set of tables and database that's all this information is going to get stored in. It's going to track all the details, including the data sources, the lineage, relationships, usage, all that stuff that can be difficult to kind of track down outside of a report, and put it all together. This is going to eliminate hundreds of manual clicks that are basically required to manually do this, to discover all these data fields, filters, calculations, etc. How it helps: one, it's going to help you eliminate unused and duplicates. You could instantly see all the reports that have never been run. You'll also have the ability to kind of see a confidence level of how similar certain reports are. So like I mentioned, I've often seen people have 25 versions of the sales report. They're almost always exactly the same. Someone may have gone in and hard-coded a filter. Someone may have, just tweaked something very minor, but underneath it all, it's the same report. We only need to migrate that one time. We don't need to do it 25 times. So it's going to help you identify those. It's also going to allow you to plan and prioritize the high priority items. Again, we can target multiple ways, as I mentioned: usage by different user groups, different subject areas, tables. We can kind of group and organize that inventory in different ways. We'll be able to simplify and consolidate similar items, and most importantly, automate the manual work in reducing a lot of the errors that are done and occur when you're manually doing this. If you're copying and pasting, the MUN strings from calculations in Framework Manager or in reports, it's very easy, especially when you're heads down multiple hours a day, to miss something or copy and paste something incorrectly. It's going to systematically go ahead and grab that information for you. So a very low chance of errors that just happen with manual work. And then finally, we have a bunch of dashboards and reports that are already pre-built off this new target database that gets created, that allow you to kind of review and get that information out that you need We call them recipes. It can kind of show you all the relationships, lineage. It also can kind of give you a report recipe. So if you don't know anything about the old Cognos report, it's going to tell you everything you need to know as far as you need to have, a pie chart on page 1, and that pie chart is coming from this query, and it's got product and time and sales. Here's what those 3 fields are in the database and the tables they're in. Here's the relationships between the tables. You need to filter and calculate this. It's going to have all the information, very easy to consume in a single click. It also helps reduce what we call the need for unicorns, which are skill sets that we call difficult to find. They're rare because it's someone who knows Cognos well enough to kind of figure out all the old information. You also know a new tool like Power BI, Tableau, what have you. To have people who have those skill sets that are experts in both those tools are very rare in our opinion. So this is going to help you reduce the need to kind of find people who have those skill sets. You can focus on just the target source, and they don't have to really know much about the old Cognos report. It's all going to be presented to them in the Migration Assistant. Another nice thing about this we've seen in our other examples of working with customers on this is that we've seen compression factors of 90 to 95% of content. So again, those of you who have thousands of reports, you're going to probably find that a lot of them are going to be something that you don't need or are very common or can be condensed down into a single report. It's very eye-opening once you kind of see some of the content in your environment, especially on a whole, across the whole thing, and team content and my content and what's out there, being able to get that view that's just difficult with the way Cognos is currently built and the cryptic nature of the content store database. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Peter, who's going to give you a live demo of the tool. You can get a little bit more insight as to how it all looks, and then I'll wrap things up in a little bit and get to your questions.
Thank you, Todd. All right. So after as Todd was mentioning, we extract the data from the content store and the audit database, and once that information gets processed, out comes one of the summary page that we produce is this complexity analysis, and we immediately get to see metrics about our Cognos infrastructure. We have the number of reports, how many pages the reports generate, the number of query items and filters that exist in all of these reports that are in our environment. The nice thing about this, if you have an environment that has multiple content stores, you can easily see the content within each of those content stores. You can look at them holistically or individually. You can also view the stats of the content that's stored in, Thomas, in the My folders. With a simple click, yes or no, on the checkbox, we'll go through and say, now I'm given a view of my content that is just in my team content store. The other thing that you can also take a look at, if you have other folder structures, you can potentially create some simple Power BI functions to create, other drop downs if you're looking for, maybe you have a QA folder or you have another folder that you have put things in that are no longer being executed. So you can, modify the output, based upon the information that you have within your content store. When we take a look at our report complexity groups, the reports themselves, we go through a complexity scoring, trying to take a look at the level of effort it's going to take to recreate this report, especially if you're migrating to another platform. We can also see how many times each of these reports in the previous slide were executed. So you also get some visibility into those metrics as well. In this report complexity group, we organize these groups by their complexity, in the high or medium, low, or complex bucket. And the idea is to be able to give you an idea as to the level of effort it's going to take to recreate all of this content. And again, right now, this is just purely looking at the content as it exists in the team content structure without any other subsequent passes through the data to try and figure out what other content might be there. Again, this is just purely at what's out there, but we could, start to layer in the reports that have been there, the reports that have been executed, and the reports that have, say, been executed in the last 6 months, 9 months, to try and get a more cleaner focus as to what content is out there that is actively being utilized. The next tab that we've got is our report execution. And again, this is more of a graphical view of the same content that was in the first report complexity tab. The difference here is, if you can see, we've also included this report view execution count as part of the metrics. And what this allows us to do is, in the audit of when a report is executed, if a report view is being executed behind the scenes, Cognos in the audit is just tracking that report view's execution. Through our process, we go through and make the association back to that original report. So we know that, all of the different report views that might exist are all surfacing from the same report. So it gives you some insights into not having to recreate, 2 reports or 5 reports, but just looking at that same one base report view that is being utilized as part of the execution. So the next thing we also take a look at, in the same thing that we did for our reports, we also do for our models. And this one now allows us to focus on all of our FM packages that we have deployed and the components that were necessary to create each individual FM package. We also, again, compute a complexity score on the models. And this one, again, very similar to the reports. We're looking at how many tables are contained within each of these FM packages, how many joins, how many relationships, how many filters, how many query subjects, trying to analyze that footprint of that model to come up with a complexity score. And again, we can also see, the number of data sources that are being utilized by the content, how many reports are being referenced, whether it's a query or report, how many times have those reports been executed, and how many users of those reports or that package exist. So in this, looking at the GoSales simple, again, simple data summary, 2 users have been executing reports 56 times. So it'll give you some ideas as to, the usability, of packages that exist within your infrastructure. So the next sort of piece we do is we take a look at this quadrant, and this again uses the complexity analysis, but this time it's looking at more of the how complex are the models and how popular each of those models are based upon the number of report executions. Ideally, when converting to a new platform, you want to start off with any package that has a low complexity but has a high usage. And this particular graph allows you to see very easily which packages fit that notion, and this allows us, when doing a project, we can start with this low complexity, high usage, and that's to give us, an easier development objective, but at the same time, giving us a high impact, to our end user community for being able to convert over content. And then the last piece that's available through the initial summary book is just really our user summary. And this is going to give you some insight into the user base that you have and how frequent they are utilizing the content that has been deployed within, your content store. And again, you have the content stores, you can have multiple, you can select them, you have a date range, you can, just a simple slider to drag and drop across it to figure out, any given timeline of how far back you want to look to see who's been executing. And this is really good for, any license true up, especially if you're moving over to another platform and you're looking to see how many licenses to buy. Rather than just do a simple, swap of I have, 100 Cognos licenses, I need, 100 new licenses. This can actually let you see how many are actively using it and be able to, potentially save some funds as you move to the new platform. So the next workbook that we talk about is getting down into more details, for each of the migrations. And the first one was looking at reports and packages sort of independently with some execution counts. But now we start to get into the details. And this was where, in this particular overview, we can simply select any given package, and it's going to tell us, how many reports that are out there, the different data sources that exist, or the tables that the information is coming from, and what type of data source are we using, whether it's SQL Server, Oracle, ODBC, whatever type of connection we're using, as well as within the FM package itself, what namespace is this information being pulled from, the query subjects that are being used, and the tables that are being used as part of this particular package. When we shift over to the reports tab, we start to get a deeper dive into each of the reports that exist. And so in this particular one, I can see for this one particular book, we've got 11 queries that are out there. We have 11 pages of data. We have 33 query items, some filters. And the nice part about this is all interactive. I can simply click on a particular container that's out there, and it's going to tell me, what pages it's located on, what queries are needed in order to produce the output, and telling me what query items are also being utilized as part of that output. So this gives you that recipe, as Todd's saying, for being able to recreate the report. So you have all of the metadata that's coming from the package, where you can find it within the package, any calculations that are being done on the report itself come up in a clear and concise view, as well as being able to see any of the filters that are being applied, to any of the given queries. And again, the tables that are being utilized as part of this particular reporting output. And the next tab, again, is still focusing on executions, but now it's the intersection that we can see for each particular package. We can see the number of reports that are being executed, when were they last executed, how many executions, and how many users are using them. And this allows us to, start that refinement of what is our true content that needs to be converted. Without reports that haven't been executed, you can see the content that's there, how many are in that particular category. And again, using the date range, you can start to navigate to make it, 6 months ago, 9 months ago, a year ago, to be able to see what is actively being executed. And then the final piece that we have as part of the base is really dealing with the relationships that exist within the actual package itself. And being able to take a look at the individual database tables that are part of the FM model, being able to see and click on any given table, and being able to see all of the relationships that exist. What tables does it join to, or what tables are joined from this one particular table. So it gives you that insight to be able to recreate an FM package without physically having to have that package up and go through it line by line and trace it back and forth. This gives you a much cleaner approach in being able to get information about your package, about the tables that are being used, and about the relationships that exist. And with that, we'll turn it back over to you, Todd.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Let me grab the screen here. Okay, so what's next? If you are interested in what you saw today, you can find more information about the Migration Assistant on our website, including the sample dashboards that you just saw, some video demos, and some case studies. We'd also be happy to speak with you about your unique situation. If you have any questions, please reach out. Also, additional resources from Senturus. We've got hundreds of free resources on our website in our Knowledge Center. We've been committed to sharing our BI expertise for over a decade now. Just go to senturus.com/resources. We've also got some upcoming webinars. Thursday, October 27th, we've got a data prep with Power BI versus Cognos and Tableau. And on November 3rd, we have an agile analytics for cloud cost management. So make sure you register for those if you're interested. Little background on Senturus. We concentrate on BI modernizations and migrations across the entire BI stack. We provide a full spectrum of BI services, training in Power BI, Cognos, Tableau, Python, and Azure, and proprietary software to accelerate bimodal BI and migrations. We particularly shine in hybrid BI environments. We've been focused exclusively on business analytics for over 20 years. Our team is large enough to meet all of your business analytic needs, yet small enough to provide personal attention. We are also hiring. If you're interested in joining us, we're looking for the following positions: a senior Microsoft BI consultant and a managing consultant. Please email us at jobs@senturus.com if you're interested, and check out the job descriptions on our website on the URL posted there. And then finally, some Q&A. If you have any questions, go ahead and post them into the Q&A section of the GoToWebinar panel, and we can go ahead and take a look at those. As I said before, if we don't get to your question today, we can always post those in addition to the deck, which will be on our website. Here's a question. We're using PowerPlay reports. Does this inventory work for PowerPlay? That is a good question. I don't know offhand. I don't know if anyone on the line knows for sure. If not, I will find out and post a response to that question just for future reference. I know that tool is still around, but being deprecated at some point, but let me check and see. I know we do get other legacy content like Query Studio in there, so let me see if that's also captured, but we don't personally use it in our sandbox environment, but I will find out.
Yeah, just one quick point of clarification, Todd, on that PowerPlay question for Tina. So I'm not sure offhand if the tool pulls PowerPlay Studio reports, but it definitely doesn't handle the older standalone PowerPlay. So if you're using the old PowerPlay FAT client, I would say the answer is no. PowerPlay Studio maybe, and as Todd said, we'll have to check on that for you.
Yeah, and that kind of feeds into the question just came in. Are you using the content store database to build these metrics? And the answer is yes. So if the data is in the content store database, there's a good chance we can get it out. And if you've ever looked at those tables, essentially, every single report and the FM model itself are XML code. So basically, we just kind of decode that. So if you have it and it's saved in your Cognos Content Store database, it's going to be in there somewhere. It might just be a little bit different logic or the way the XML is structured if it's outside of the sort of standard reports and models and things that we typically work with, but I will find out one way or the other. Does this work for IBM Cloud? Unfortunately, no, because that is completely locked down with the IBM Cognos Cloud. You don't have access to the server or the database. They don't give you access to that. I don't know if Steve, you've had any additional insight on that. I mean,
hey Todd, this is Scott.
Yeah.
Hey, with IBM Cloud, there's a couple of ways to work around it. There are some export functionalities where we can export and do an import. It does require a little bit of customization on our end, but we can get some or most of the same metadata.
Thanks, Scott. Another question, does this tool need to be on the Cognos server or any desktop? It doesn't have to be on the Cognos server. It can be anywhere. It's basically just needs to be a place where it's going to set up a local, SQL Server instance to write to. It needs to be able to read against your content store database and just run some scripts. So it's nothing too substantial, just as long as it can read from your Cognos Content Store with some kind of database connection string and then be able to write to a new SQL Server database. Those are really the only main requirements, and we can send you more specs if you're interested. Just shoot us a note offline. But yeah, it's pretty low key setup as far as what you need to do to get this loaded.
Todd, one addition to that is we can, especially for the assessment, the summary reports, we can run those in our cloud as well with backups of the content store in the audit database. So we don't actually need to put the migration assistant in the client environment in order to generate the reports. And then when the report comes back to the client, it comes back in the form of a Power BI desktop package, so that you're, you don't need an extra license for that, and all the data is contained in the report package itself. So it's fairly portable on the way back. So the assessment itself, and maybe this is a good time to just call out that when we engage with clients, we have a kind of a number of different ways to engage, but one of the ways that we engage is by doing a 1 to 3 week assessment. And during that assessment, the first part of it is to ingest the metadata, and then we analyze it. Peter is one of those folks who does a lot of that analyzing of the data once it's in the reports themselves. And then we present back to our clients what we found, and then deliver the Power BI package back to them. So it is, you do have the option for portability, for basically us to generate the inventory for you and then deliver it back to you.
Thanks, Scott.
Mm-hmm.
Another question here about what happens when Cognos upgrade is done. Do you have to upgrade the tool? The answer is no. Again, it's going to, with an upgrade, typically it's going to upgrade the content store and some of the objects in there. You can go ahead and just rerun the inventory process. It'll repopulate the data and you can get fresher results, but there's nothing in the tool itself that would need to be upgraded. It's more of just refreshing your content. Another question, in the case of duplicates of packages and objects, does this tool have the ability to delete the duplicates? So this tool isn't going to make any changes to your content. It is strictly informational. We're not touching anything in that content store database. It's just to give you the information to decide on what you want to keep, delete, decide to leave behind on a migration, etc. But we definitely do not touch anything. In fact, it's a read-only connection to your content store database just to get information out. We then create and populate our own tables, which drive the workbook that Peter was demoing a little while ago.
One of the other things I'll add in here is that in very large organizations that have thousands or tens of thousands of reports, we may employ other automation tools in order to manage content. So if you want to break up the work into the discovery and design of your project, whether it's a cleanup project or a migration project, you first need to run your inventory, collect all the information about all the reports and packages. Then you design what it is that you intend to do. Then you get to choose, are you going to do that by hand? Are you going to do it in small phases? Or would you like either to build some custom automation to save yourself some time, basically clicking thousands and thousands of buttons, or there are some tools on the market that'll help you manage your content, your Cognos content in bulk. Really, the design phase, we find that to be the most critical. The secondary phase, you really have options, and that's largely a function of how many changes do you really need to make, and how long would it take a person to do it by hand, and is it cost effective to possibly buy a small content automation tool that will help you make those changes automatically if they can be. So you get options at that second stage for automation as well. We've done projects both ways.
Okay, one more question. Would this product work for Tableau analysis, or is it Cognos specific? So right now it is Cognos specific. We are looking into other ways to possibly build upon this, but today it's just the Cognos content itself that would be stripped out and presented to you in the workbooks that we demoed a little while ago. Good question.
Todd, I know Arjun had asked some questions about licensing costs. There's a lot of options there. I put in the chat a link to my calendar. Feel free to reach out to me if you'd like to kind of talk about the different options. We're actually pretty flexible with how we engage with this. We think that you could certainly license it from us directly, but the real value comes in us collaborating on the use of the product. So we have an assessment that we can run, and those assessments start at about 10,000. At $995 is our base price for the assessment, and with that, it will give you all the things that I described earlier. So you can get basically all the reports plus more, and a database to query, and a platform to build custom reports into for $10,000. That's the kind of the starting place. And that content will be yours at the end of that assessment, as well as our analysis and recommendations.
Okay, I don't think there's any other questions coming in. I will leave it open for just a couple more minutes. If you do have a question, go ahead and just put it in there and we can follow up offline. But wanted to thank everyone for joining us today. Thank Peter and Scott as well, and hope you have a great day. Thank you.